There's a reason Sigma males stand alone. And it's not loneliness, it's alignment. They don't isolate because they hate people. They isolate because they refuse to lose themselves in a world built on noise, ego, and validation. While everyone else is competing for attention, the Sigma quietly disappears. Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. He knows that solitude sharpens clarity, that silence exposes truth, that being alone isn't empty. It's where he becomes unshakable. Most people fear being alone because they can't face their own thoughts. The Sigma thrives in it because in that space he builds his discipline, his vision, and his control. Every time he chooses solitude over approval, he grows stronger, calmer, and harder to influence. This is why the Sigma male stays powerful, not because he stands above others, but because he stands within himself. Stay until the end, because once you understand why Sigma males stand alone, you'll never chase validation again. Before we start, subscribe to Ultrawise, like this video, and let's break down why solitude isn't the Sigma's weakness, it's his weapon. They don't fear solitude, they master it. For most people, solitude feels like a prison. For a Sigma male, it feels like home. He doesn't run from silence, he embraces it. Because he understands that being alone isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's where the world's noise fades, and truth finally has room to speak. The Sigma male learns early that solitude exposes everything, your strengths, your weaknesses, your wounds, and your potential. And while others drown in that awareness, he uses it to build himself. Every hour spent in silence becomes a brick laid toward mastery. He studies, reflects, and sharpens his discipline while the rest of the world seeks distraction. He doesn't need constant company to feel alive. He doesn't need validation to feel worthy. His solitude is his sanctuary, a sacred space where he regains control over his thoughts, emotions, and energy. In that space, he becomes unshakable. The Sigma understands that when you can be alone without losing your mind, you become unstoppable. Because if solitude doesn't scare you, nothing can. The world's biggest fear is being unseen, unheard, forgotten. But the Sigma learned long ago that visibility means nothing if it costs authenticity. In solitude, he rebuilds himself quietly. He analyzes his past, adjusts his mindset, and refocuses on what truly matters. While others are busy showing off progress online, the Sigma is building progress that speaks for itself. He disappears not to escape the world, but to return stronger, wiser, and more dangerous in silence. That's what people never understand. His distance isn't rejection, it's refinement. His quiet moments aren't loneliness, they're alignment. Because every time he chooses solitude over noise, he gains more power, more clarity, more control. The Sigma doesn't fear being alone, he fears losing himself in the wrong crowd. That's why he stands apart, not to prove he's better, but to stay connected to something most people lost a long time ago: peace. Solitude isn't his weakness, it's his weapon. And in mastering it, he becomes the kind of man the world can't easily shake or replace. They refuse emotional dependence. The Sigma male doesn't build his strength on the approval of others. He's learned that emotional dependence is the fastest way to lose control of your life. Most people can't stand to be alone because their emotions depend on how others treat them. The Sigma refuses to live that way. He's not heartless, he feels deeply, but he also knows that feelings can become chains if you let them control you. That's why he masters emotional discipline. When something hurts him, he doesn't react impulsively. He processes it. When someone leaves, he doesn't beg, he accepts. And when people try to manipulate his emotions, he doesn't fall, he observes. The Sigma has faced enough betrayal and disappointment to understand that not everyone deserves access to his emotional world. He learned that peace starts when you stop handing your happiness to people who can't even manage their own. So instead of depending on others for stability, he builds it within himself. He knows that power is not about being cold, it's about being centered. When everyone else is chasing constant reassurance, the Sigma finds strength in stillness. He becomes emotionally self-sufficient. His mood doesn't depend on who texts him. His confidence doesn't depend on who validates him. And his worth doesn't fluctuate based on who stays or leaves. That's what separates him from the crowd. The world teaches men to chase approval, to be liked, to always prove themselves. But the Sigma has evolved beyond that. He doesn't need to be liked. He needs to be respected. And if that respect only comes when he sacrifices his peace, he'll choose peace every single time. The Sigma understands that emotional independence isn't isolation, it's liberation. Because when your emotions are no longer controlled by others, you become untouchable. So while the world reacts, he remains still. While others seek constant reassurance, he stays calm. And that calmness, that emotional control, is what makes him powerful. The Sigma doesn't avoid emotions, he owns them. And that's why no one can ever truly break him. Because his strength doesn't come from being loved. It comes from being complete. They observe more than they speak. The Sigma male doesn't waste his words. He measures them. Because he understands something most people don't. The louder you are, the less you learn. That's why he speaks little, but sees everything. His silence isn't shyness, it's awareness. It's his way of gathering data, understanding motives, and reading people long before they reveal themselves. While others talk to fill the silence, the Sigma listens. He watches what people say when they think no one's paying attention. He notices the tone, the timing, the subtle shift in energy when truth meets pretense. He studies people, not to judge them, but to protect his peace. Observation is his shield. Knowledge is his defense. He's learned that you can't control what others say, but you can control what you give them to work with. That's why he keeps his goals private, his emotions guarded, and his intentions invisible. The Sigma understands when people know too much, they start to interfere. When they know too little, they start to assume. So he lets them assume. Because he knows silence often exposes more than words ever could. This habit of observing first, speaking last, gives him an advantage in every situation. In business, relationships, or conflict, the Sigma always knows more than he says. People underestimate him because he doesn't talk much, but that's exactly how he wins. His restraint disarms, his calm confuses, and his silence creates an aura of power that words could never replicate. While others seek validation through noise, he builds understanding through observation. He doesn't need to prove his intelligence, he demonstrates it through patience. He knows that true power doesn't come from being heard. It comes from knowing when to stay quiet. And when he finally does speak, his words cut through the noise like a blade, sharp, deliberate, unforgettable. Because the Sigma doesn't speak to be noticed, he speaks to be remembered. But he understands one truth: silence is control, and observation is power. And that's why while everyone else talks their way into chaos, the Sigma's quiet mind is already 10 steps ahead, calm, prepared, and completely untouchable. They walk away from approval. A Sigma male reaches a point where he realizes something powerful. Approval is a trap. The more you chase it, the further you drift from who you really are. That's why he stops performing for people who will never understand him. He doesn't need applause. He needs authenticity. For most of his life, he probably tried to fit in, to be liked, accepted, or at least understood. But every time he bent his truth to please others, he felt weaker inside. That's when he decided no more. The moment he stopped needing approval, everything changed. He learned that validation is like a drug, addictive, temporary, and empty. It makes you dependent on the opinions of people who don't even know themselves. The Sigma breaks that addiction. He doesn't dress, talk, or act to impress. He moves for purpose, not popularity. When the crowd goes one way, he walks the other. When the world says fit in, he says stand firm. Because he knows that authenticity always costs something, but faking it costs your soul. The Sigma would rather be misunderstood for who he truly is than praised for who he's not. That's what gives him power. When you stop needing approval, you become unpredictable. You no longer bend under pressure. You no longer explain your silence. You simply move, focused, detached, unbothered, and people can't control a man who isn't chasing their acceptance. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. The Sigma understands that the right people will respect him naturally, and the wrong ones will leave. And either outcome is peace. He doesn't fear being disliked because he knows respect lasts longer than popularity. Walking away from approval doesn't make him cold. It makes him free. Free from external judgment, free from fake expectations, free from the constant need to prove his worth. He's no longer available for anything that costs him his authenticity. Because at the end of the day, the Sigma doesn't live for applause. He lives for alignment. And that's why he stands alone, yet never feels lost. His self-respect is the only approval he'll ever need. They build strength in isolation. When most people feel lonely, they crumble. When a Sigma male feels lonely, he builds. Because isolation doesn't weaken him, it refines him. The Sigma doesn't fear being alone. He uses that space like a forge, shaping his mind, his habits, and his resilience. In the silence, he meets himself, the real version, stripped of noise, expectation, and distraction. It's uncomfortable at first. There's nowhere to hide from your flaws, your fears, or your failures. But instead of running, the Sigma confronts them. He studies them. He learns from them. And in doing so, he becomes the kind of man who no longer breaks under pressure. He thrives in it. While others depend on motivation from outside, the Sigma finds his power within. Isolation gives him time to focus, to think deeply, and to realign his purpose. Every hour alone becomes a deposit into his self-mastery. Every challenge faced without help becomes proof that he doesn't need the crowd to survive. He lifts in silence, he studies in silence, he grinds in silence. And one day, his results make all the noise for him. That's the Sigma's secret. Isolation isn't a punishment. It's a preparation ground. It's where warriors sharpen their discipline while everyone else is distracted by attention. People often mistake his distance for arrogance, but it's not, it's growth. He's not avoiding people, he's evolving beyond the need for them. The world's chaos only slows him down, and he has no interest in living at anyone else's pace. That's why isolation becomes his strength. It's where he transforms pain into precision, silence into focus, and loneliness into power. The Sigma doesn't depend on the world to push him, he pushes himself. And when he finally steps back into the noise, he's different, calmer, wiser, and far more dangerous. Because the man who builds in isolation doesn't just survive solitude, he conquers it. The Sigma's strength isn't built in crowds. It's built in quiet rooms, behind closed doors, when no one's watching. That's why when the world shakes, he doesn't. Because his foundation was built in silence. They see through superficial bonds. The Sigma male has one of the sharpest forms of awareness. He can see right through people. Not their smiles, not their words, but their intentions. Over time, he's learned that most connections aren't real, they're convenient. People stay close as long as it benefits them, but disappear the moment you stop giving. The Sigma doesn't resent that truth. He just stops expecting depth in shallow places. He's been around enough masks to recognize authenticity the second he sees it. That's why he moves differently now. Slower, quieter, more selective. He doesn't confuse friendliness with loyalty or attention with care. He knows that some people like your presence only when it serves their ego, and once you no longer feed it, they vanish. The Sigma doesn't chase them. He thanks them for revealing themselves. He's not cold-hearted, he just values energy that's real. He understands that false connections drain you faster than loneliness ever could. That's why he chooses solitude over fake company every time. His peace costs too much to be shared with people who pretend to care but secretly compete. When the Sigma bonds, it's genuine. His loyalty runs deep, but only for those who match his energy. He gives respect, but never begs for it. He listens, but never overshares. He can sit in a room full of people and still feel alone, not because he's disconnected, but because he can sense when the connection isn't real. That sensitivity used to hurt him, now it protects him. He sees through manipulation disguised as kindness, through flattery that hides jealousy, through promises that come without consistency. He trusts patterns, not words. And once he recognizes a superficial bond, he walks away quietly. No confrontation, no drama, just distance, because he understands that real connection doesn't require convincing. That's the Sigma's strength. He doesn't need a crowd to feel whole. He'd rather have one real soul beside him than 100 pretending to care. He's mastered the art of seeing through people, not to judge them, but to protect his peace. Because once you see what's fake, you stop craving it. And that's when freedom truly begins. They protect their energy like it's sacred. A Sigma male treats his energy like treasure because he knows it is. He's learned the hard way that not everyone deserves access to his mind, his time, or his emotions. After years of giving too much to the wrong people, he finally understands energy is currency, and once you spend it, you don't get it back. That's why the Sigma moves differently now. He doesn't argue to be right. He doesn't explain himself to be understood. He doesn't waste energy convincing people who are committed to misunderstanding him. Every reaction, every conversation, every emotional response costs energy, and the Sigma refuses to overspend. He sees how easily people let their energy be drained. Endless scrolling, pointless drama, meaningless talk. But the Sigma? He's intentional. He values silence more than small talk, peace more than popularity, and boundaries more than validation. He understands that what you allow is what you continue, so he allows very little. Protecting his energy doesn't make him cold, it makes him clear. He's not avoiding people, he's avoiding chaos. He's not detached, he's disciplined. The Sigma has realized that his power doesn't come from how much he gives, it comes from how much he preserves. He's selective about who gets his time. If a conversation doesn't bring peace, purpose, or growth, he's gone. If someone constantly drains his spirit, he detaches. Quietly, respectfully, permanently. The Sigma doesn't announce boundaries, he enforces them through distance. This level of control confuses people who thrive on drama, but it also commands respect. Because the Sigma's calm isn't apathy, it's mastery. It's the result of protecting his space until only good energy remains. When your peace becomes your priority, your life changes. The Sigma knows this better than anyone. He doesn't need chaos to feel alive. He doesn't need validation to feel seen. His calmness is his rebellion. He protects his energy like it's sacred because it is. That energy builds his vision, fuels his purpose, and keeps his mind free. And when you guard your energy like that, nothing and no one can shake your power. They don't need the world. The world eventually needs them. The Sigma male doesn't chase the world. He builds himself until the world comes looking for him. While everyone else is fighting for attention, he's mastering his craft in silence. While others crave validation, he's creating value. That's the difference. The Sigma knows that power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being needed. He doesn't follow trends. He builds systems. He doesn't copy others. He becomes the reference. The world calls men like him mysterious, distant, or hard to understand. But that's only because they can't control what they can't predict. The Sigma's independence makes people curious. His calm makes them uneasy. And his results make them respect him. He doesn't depend on the world for recognition. He depends on himself for growth. Every time he's doubted, he works harder. Every time he's overlooked, he becomes sharper. He understands that obscurity isn't failure, it's incubation. It's where he develops quietly until his impact can't be ignored anymore. The Sigma male doesn't need the spotlight because his results create their own gravity. When the world finally notices him, it's not because he begged for attention. It's because he became too valuable to overlook. The same people who once questioned his silence now study it. The same ones who doubted his path now want to walk it. He doesn't seek validation from the crowd ends up seeking validation from him. That's the paradox of the Sigma. The moment he stops needing the world starts needing him. His detachment isn't isolation, it's focus. His absence isn't rejection, it's alignment. And his silence isn't weakness, it's control. The Sigma male's power lies in his independence. He can walk away from anything and rebuild from nothing. That's why the world can never truly own him, because he was built to stand alone. And eventually, when the world grows tired of noise and chaos, it turns to men like him, the ones who mastered silence, solitude, and self-control. The Sigma doesn't need the world to recognize his worth. The world needs him to remember what real power looks like. The Sigma male doesn't stand alone because he has to. He stands alone because he chooses to. The world taught him that solitude is the price of self-respect. And once he understood that, he stopped apologizing for his peace. He doesn't seek validation anymore. He doesn't crave approval. He's built a world within himself, one that doesn't collapse when people leave, one that doesn't depend on noise to feel alive. That's where his true power comes from. The Sigma doesn't need the crowd to see him. He needs his vision to guide him. Every quiet decision, every lonely night, every sacrifice in silence has turned him into the kind of man that chaos can't break and fear can't touch. So if you stand alone right now, don't mistake it for weakness. It's transformation. The world may not understand your silence today, but one day it'll call its strength. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to UltraWise, like this video, and comment, "I stand alone, but unbreakable." Because your solitude isn't your ending, it's your becoming. Keep walking your path quietly. Keep mastering your peace. Because one day, the world will realize what you already know, that the man who stands alone stands unshaken.